Recently, Luke Rockhold made a video basically saying Jiu Jitsu isn't a fight, and it's caused quite a lot of controversial between people who like Jiu Jitsu and say it is basically like a fight, and people agreeing with Luke Rockhold saying it kind of isn't a fight. So that's why I thought I'd make a quick little video to get my opinion across. But just before I get into the video, if Jiu Jitsu is your thing, you can use a discount code to get the best Jiu Jitsu dummy on the market. So that's Will to Fight 5. I'll put it in the description below and in the comment section. These are literally the best grappling dummies on the market. They really are. I've tried with loads of different grappling dummies and these are the best. They do a kids one, medium sized grappling dummy, and a large one that needs restuffing. But as you can see, I've got 3 different types of dummies that are that good. So if you own a martial arts gym, you definitely need one in. If you do a lot of solo training, you definitely need a smarty grappling dummy. So use a discount code WILL2FIGHT5. So back into the video. Is Jiu Jitsu a fight? Now, I know where we're sort of coming from with this. You're not necessarily getting punched in the face. That's why I think a lot of people like Jiu Jitsu, and you can feel like you can train Jiu Jitsu more at a realistic level of doing the actual Jiu Jitsu as a sport. So you can roll quite regularly, quite tough in Jiu Jitsu. As long as you tap out early, you take the ego out the door, you don't necessarily get hurt. Well, unlike other sports like boxing and Thai boxing, it's a lot more getting punched in the face, obviously MMA as well, it's a lot more getting punched in the face, so you can't spar as often, you can't do the actual pure sport itself as often. That's why you've got to do pad work, you've got to do drilling, so you can't do the art of it as regularly because of injuries. Don't get me wrong, you can pick up loads of injuries during Jiu Jitsu, but again, it does seem to be a lot more safer. So that's one aspect what sort of come to mind when he mentioned that. The other argument he was saying is basically a self-defense situation. It's not always that good because of people pulling guard and stuff like that. Now, this is always a bit of an awkward one for me because I've trained Jiu Jitsu, I've trained stand up, I do MMA. But if I was to get into a fight on the street, even if I just knew Jiu Jitsu and I was a Jiu Jitsu player, I think a Jiu Jitsu player would know not to pull guard on someone, or even still, they would have a lot more of a chance against someone who don't fight. But there's that old saying in Jiu Jitsu, how to turn a black belt to a blue belt, punch him in the face. Because it is different when strikes start happening. That's why, as a MMA competitor, when I'm doing my MMA training, obviously if we're just throw rolling, I always tell people to put on gloves, and even if you just tap it just lightly so you know where the threats are. That's the problem, I think, with Jiu Jitsu at the moment with the sport version of Jiu Jitsu. Where there isn't strikes involved, it has become its own sort of style, and the threat of strikes ain't there, so you ain't got to worry about it. So you can go for leg locks like crazily, you can be on the bottom, you can pull guard because you ain't got the risk of being hit. But that is why it's a sport. It's exactly the same with boxing. You can make the argument with boxing. Because you're not taking kicks, because you're not dealing with the wrestling, how well does it translate to a street fight? So, translating to a street fight, I'd always say, if there was 2 people fighting, someone who's got 5 years Jiu Jitsu under them, someone who's got no Jiu Jitsu, they're the same sort of size, they're about to have a fight, I'm going to pick the Jiu Jitsu person all day long. Exactly the same with boxing, exactly the same with kickboxing, any of the others. I'm always going to pick the trained athlete who's trained in the combat sport, wrestling, example, you get a picture. It's always going to come across to the trained athlete. Now, having said all that, with the fighting aspect of it, I feel like, me personally, I'd be just as nervous entering a Jiu Jitsu competition as I would a kickboxing competition, if you class kickboxing as a real fight. I feel like, because I'm quite stubborn and I wouldn't want to tap, I would tap, it would come to the shove, but I do feel like in a proper competition, I'm not talking about rolling in the gym, in a proper heated competition, I feel like it can be just as dangerous as striking, if not more dangerous. You get your arm broke, you're out for a long time. And some of these submission moves can be very dangerous, especially some of the leg locking and stuff like that. So I feel like the nerves would be just as much there for me personally as if it would be in a real fight where I'm going to get punched in the face. So, as for it being classed as a real fight or not, it's a hard one. I get where he's coming from. You're not taking the punches to the face, but there is still that element of danger. It's a kind of style of fighting, but it ain't quite fighting. But you could have the argument, the same like I said, if you just do something like boxing. Is it a fight? Yeah, you're getting punched, yeah. But there's other aspects of the fighting what isn't there as a pure form itself. That's why me personally, I think MMA is by far the best one for self-defense, because you're learning a little bit of everything. Now, when people start talking about weapons involved and more than one opponent, again, if I was a betting man, then it's always going to be the person who's got his mate helping him, or if you've got a weapon or not. There's only so far training's going to get you for a street self-defense situation. But as for an actual fight, I get what he means. You've got less chance if you tap out nice and early of getting hurt in Jiu-Jitsu, rather than boxing. If you go into a boxing fight, you're going to get big time bumps and bruises, you're going to get punched in the face, you're going to get that water in eyes, and you can't exactly tap out as easy for boxing. You can't be in the corner taking shots and just sort of tap out and then it gets called the end of a fight. At least with Jiu-Jitsu, if it gets a bit too heated and you get caught in a submission, you can easily tap out. If you're getting tired, you can even make a mistake to get tapped out easy. Not that it's a good way to go about it, but maybe that's what his opinion is. Again, this is so hard for me, I'm very on the ropes. I completely understand what he's saying, but it's more of a fight than not fighting at all, and I'd rather fight someone with no experience at all than fight someone who's done, say, a good amount of time with Jiu-Jitsu. 5 years of Jiu-Jitsu, they're going to be a very, very dangerous person. Someone who's done no training, they're not going to be as dangerous. Someone who's done 5 years of boxing, they're going to be someone dangerous. Someone who's done 5 years of MMA, who can strike, wrestle and do Jiu-Jitsu and strike on the floor, in my eyes, they're going to be the most dangerous. That's why, in my opinion, MMA, like I say, I've said it on the channel before, I think it's best for street self-defense. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Is Luke Rockhold right, or is he wrong?